OHL Central Scouting as a guy who looks at the southwestern part of the province. James Kennedy joins me now. And James, good to see you. How are you?
Good. Yourself, Terry?
Very well, and it's an exciting time for you. I'm sure as you've seen the choices roll in here, excited to see especially the players that you've had a chance to watch with the Alliance this season.
Yeah, I think we're about up to 20 players selected so far through almost 8 rounds. So yeah, it's exciting, and obviously we had 3 first rounders go from the Alliance last night, and then another 4 in the third round. So yeah, lots of good players being selected out of this area.
James, for people not familiar, for maybe other parts of the province, give me the geography lesson on the Alliance.
So we're Hamilton to the KW, all the way down to Sarnia, your neck of the woods, through to Windsor, and everything in between.
There's a lot of there's a lot of real estate there between those cities, and I'm sure that's the case for you and a lot of the players and coaches and families. A lot of time up and down the 401 and on the highways. I've got to think it makes for a pretty busy time during the hockey season.
Yeah, it does. Luckily for me, I live right in London, so it's kind of right in the middle, the hub of the Alliance. But you're traveling, you're seeing teams travel from Windsor to Hamilton, from Sarnia all the way up to Kitchener and Waterloo. So yeah, it's a lot of time spent on the road. But it's great hockey. There's a lot of really good teams down here. We had some really good playoffs. So it's again, it's a lot of travel, and it's a lot of travel for these teams. But these players are trying to prepare to get to the next level.
Take me through this season. And I know, it was good to see, of course, the fact we got back to normal for the most part. I know it was a little bit of a things slowed down around Christmas and into January, but in general, I've got to think as you interacted with the players and, obviously coaches and families, saw them around the rink and fellow scouts, it had to be nice just to have somewhat a sense of normalcy this season.
Yeah, it really was. Aside from really no games in September, usually we're off to the Titans tournament early in September. I still got to 5 tournaments. The Wendy Duff did in October in London here, a tournament in Kitchener, the Golden Puck in Waterloo, the Silver Stick in Whitby in November. And then obviously we had a bit of a shutdown. Then we got right into playoffs in February. So, aside from really that month of being locked down or shut down, I could say, it was a pretty normal season for myself.
When you're watching players, what sort of things do you look for, as you're making your notes, as you're going through? And obviously, I'm sure one of the things is the progression of the player over the course of the season. But if you were sort of to let us inside your notebook and your notes on the computer, what are some of the things you're looking for?
Obviously skating, and I know you talked about it last night with Darrell Woodley and other scouts, but I call it the 3 H's: head, heart, hands. Head, obviously smarts. Heart, compete level, the want, the will, the drive, and then hands, the skill, the ability to make plays, the ability to do things at high speeds. So I look at all those attributes, and I know we talked about off ice and on ice attitude. I watch players when they're on the bench. I watch players after their team gets scored on. I watch players after they score a goal. So I look for sort of those 3 things: head, heart, hands. But I also look for attitude and on ice abilities.
And I guess, and that's the thing too, and I'm sure, you might hear about a player is coming into this U16 season, and then as they continue on, and I'm sure it's that progression as well, where maybe, you made a note in September or October, and you want to see how that player progressed getting into February, getting into March, as we get set for the OHL priority selection. I've got to think sometimes you might go back and you sort of check your notes to see how the player has progressed over the season.
Always. And Central Scouting, we all do our own lists for our area. So I have my Alliance list, and the one thing Darrell's always telling us, he's always like, make sure you're going back on that list and make sure you're adjusting it. And, a player that might be in your top 5 in September, maybe, your bottom 10 or your bottom 15 come February. So things change, things fluctuate as the year goes on. Being in London, and again, they were a pretty good team this year. So you got to sort of categorize everybody kind of by playing London, and then as well going to the major tournaments, watching teams like London and Elgin play, the Junior Canadians or the Mississauga Senators. So it's a lot of comparables throughout the season, but again, as you said, the list will change, and sometimes it can change dramatically.
I know, James, for the regional scouts with OHL Central Scouting, this is not a full-time job. It's a passion. And I know, so many of you, it's, want to be around the rink. What makes it so special for you to, be part of this and, be in the rink like that? I'm sure there's something that really just draws you into it.
I get it's the love of the game, right? And I've loved hockey ever since I was a young boy. And, unfortunately, I didn't have the skills to play at the high levels. But, yeah, I got into coaching for about 10 years, coaching at the AAA level. And then I transitioned from coaching to scouting. And I just, being at the rink is like being in a second home for me. And, it's fun to watch these kids, like we talked about earlier, progress through the season, but it's also fun to watch them a couple years from now, and talk about one kid I watched a lot with the O2 group was George Diaco. And look where he kind of started out in his first year with the OHL, and look what he's doing now on a really good team, and he's contributing. So he's a player that is fun to watch. He's aggressive, he's hard nosed, but he's got some skill, and those are the type of things that makes me want to come back to the ring, because watching those types of players, and then a couple years from now we'll go back and look at the '06 draft and watch those players that have progressed through the OHL, and then this year we're looking at the '04s in the NHL, and so I'll follow along with that too as well. So yeah, I mean, you got to have a passion, you got to have a love for the game. It's not just going to the rink and watching a game. It's going home and doing reports and doing lists and being in constant contact with OHL general managers and other scouts. So there's a lot to it, but you know what? I love it. I wouldn't want to do anything else.
James, I'm sure over the years there's probably been situations where a player that you just thought, okay, you know what? There's something special about this player. They're either going to be maybe a little bit of a late bloomer or someone who's maybe chosen a few rounds later in the OHL priority selection. But you kind of talk about even a George Diaco or someone like that, where they've had a chance to really blossom throughout their OHL career, move on maybe professional hockey or excel down the road. And I'm sure that's one where you kind of have that little wink, that little extra special feeling for those players where you thought, hey, you know what, I think there's something special here, and they've proven you right down the road, where maybe they didn't take the conventional route, for example, chosen in the first couple of rounds. I'm sure that's the enjoyment out of it as well, is seeing that player go on to have success.
Yeah, and one of those players is Naver Muddern, who actually just signed with a pro contract with the National Predators. And I actually coached Naver in minor midget, and that was my last year coaching. And I did both coaching and my first year with Central Scouting that year. And there's a player that's found a niche. I mean, he's a hard nose. I mean, there's no one that hits as hard as Naver does in the O. But there's a player that took a different path. He wasn't playing AAA in Pee Wee. We kind of went back and forth through playing AAA with the Elgin Middlesex Chiefs into playing a single A hockey in Lucan. And you know what? He just continues to get better and improve. And I think at the pro level, he can make an impact. And who knows where he'll go from here? But that's a story that's kind of fun to watch and kind of fun to follow along.
And I believe, did you have was that the team that also had Mark Woolley on it?
Definitely, yep, that had Mark Woolley too. Yeah, and there's another story and what Mark's doing with diabetes and all that type of great stuff. So, captain of the team this year in Owen Sound. So, another great story too. And that '01 age group, I was with them for a number of years, and they're overagers this year, so they won't be back next year. But it's been fun following those players along for the last 4 or 5 years.
I've got to think indeed. So there's an exact example. I thought two guys playing together on that Elgin team had to be pretty difficult for some of the opponents to play against, with Navin
They
Mutter
were.
and Mark Woolley, two guys that can certainly throw their weight around and be a physical presence. But I've got to think once again, there's that sort of special feeling you have where one's gone on to sign an NHL contract. They both had successful OHL careers. And there's Mark Woolley with the diabetes, working to be a well-rounded person as well. And I'm sure there is that situation where you think, there's that little nod, that little smile coming from you. I've got to think that's pretty rewarding.
It is, and that's one of the reasons why I coached for a number of years, and now getting into scouting. I'm not interacting with these players now, but I get to see London and Elgin 20, 30 times a season each. So you kind of get to know these players on the ice and what they do, and again, it's fun to follow along, and it's going to be fun to see a Jet Lachenko, to see if he can make the jump next year and how he's going to progress through his career.
Well, James, we appreciate the time. Certainly great job by you and the entire OHL Central scouting staff throughout the season. And we'll get a chance to see you in person very soon. But thanks for joining us here.
Thank you, Terry. Take care.
There's James Kennedy of OHL Central Scouting, handles the Alliance, and a chance for him to see the Alliance players and everyone else across the Ontario Hockey League being chosen in this 2022 OHL Priority Selection presented by Real Canadian Superstore.